game, and then I stopped and think I wouldn't know where to start. I was thinking, oh, maybe starting with the reimaginings isn't a good idea, because it might be too easy or give you a bad sense. But like, also I felt it was good because if you go from the reimaginings, they play the OG, you're like, oh my god, the OGs are way better, right? But in reality, it's like anything. You could start wherever you want. Heck, I started with Resident Evil 4, actually. Well, I started a bit with like 2 and I think 1, 3, but I was like super spawn. I just sucked ass, right? 4 was a lot more approachable and people were on it, but that's the funny thing I want to talk about is like, the reality is, unless a game is super, super, like, if it's like, say Resident Evil 4, but it was super tied to story where you would be lost if you didn't play 2, 1, or 3, then yeah, definitely start with like the first one. But with games like, again, example, Resident Evil series that, not every single Resident Evil game is like, they are connected, but you could play them individually without having to play the other ones. I'd say 5 is arguably one of the ones that you have to play other Resident Evil games to get the full enjoyment. But especially with how varied some of them are, it's really hard to recommend. Because here's the thing, right? If you're Resident Evil, the ones before 4 have a learning curve because they got kinetic controls. Or this one, see, as you guys can see, you cannot move and shoot at the same time. You have to stop. That's a bit of a learning curve for some people. But if you are willing to learn and have patience, and don't, I mean, heck, I'm playing on a fight stick, and if you're used to just hard games or anything stiff or whatever, then I recommend definitely starting with either 4 or one of the OG ones. The OG ones have a much harder learning curve because of the camera angles. But if you're like a modern gamer or younger, I definitely recommend you start with, yeah, I'd say arguably even the reimaginings, 7 or 8. But I will say this: why I don't recommend 7 and 8, they're not very good. They're not a good indicator of what the rest of the series is like. But again, it's like with anything, if that's what you're most familiar with, and it could pique your interest, like, just know this: if you found Resident Evil 7 in Village just not like, I don't really see the point of Resident Evil, go play the other ones. Like you're like, okay, I find the control scheme is interesting, whatever, it reminds me of the most games I play. Go try one of the reimaginings and whatever. And apparently that's how a lot of people, they started with the Village in 7 because it was what they're familiar with, right? Your generic weak first-person games, and they went to the reimaginings. Oh my god, it's good. And even they were having a hard time, because do know this: Resident Evil series is not very easy. Like, it requires at least an intermediate level of proficiency in gaming. So basically what I'm saying is, if you're only used to playing like rated E games and not T or M, Resident Evil is going to be a hard sell for you. But if you're proficient in at least more than 4 genres, and and you really like the gimmick of zombies and are okay with standing still and shooting, then do the Resident Evil series for you, because that's what the core of the series is. It's about tactfully thinking, it's about ammo conservation and stuff like that. So if you like things like that, the series is for you. See, boom. Instead of shooting all of them, go shoot a barrel. Like, this game has very gratifying gameplay. Of course, upgrading your weapons, things like that. So it's a linear gameplay with varying options on how to take out enemies, with very strict, tight controls. And yeah, no, but with anything, it's hard. If I were to say my highest recommendations personally, Resident Evil 4 is a very great start, 100%. If you want to get used to you want to know what an OG Resident Evil game is like, and you want to know if you want a good standard point. Like, if you play Resident Evil 4, going to the OGs, the main thing that'll be hard is the camera angles, but the controls are exactly the same. Like, when you move forward, you move forward. You move back, you move back. The thing is with the other game is the camera angles can throw you off. You have to be able to willingly be under control and shoot when given. But yeah, see, look, I control naturally, no big problem, but I've been playing for years. Another one that I would say, next to Resident Evil 4, I would highly recommend would probably be, let's see. Yeah, one of the reimaginings. Just do know, I don't know why, but people really struggle with the reimaginings. I actually have a tutorial guide up here. Feel free to check it out if you guys would like to know how to have an easier time with the reimaginings. Ones I don't recommend as much, but I feel I recommend more if you're casual. Definitely Village or 7. 7, I believe, is more easier. Just do know you're not getting a fair representation of what the entirety of the series is. Maybe a bit with like ammo conservation, but it's nowhere near to the level of like what the older Resident Evil games are. But yeah, my biggest recommendation is definitely say 4, maybe even Revelations 1. The Revelations 1's a bit hard. But really, just start with whichever one you like. Like, if you like the look of it and you start playing, you're like, okay, I can get used to it. That's a good one to start off with. For sure. Start with any of them. Like I said, -5. 5 definitely needs some context out of all of them, I think, for sure. That one has... Yeah, 6 is just ass water. I don't recommend 6, like, at all. Granted, it has co-op, so if you have co-op... Like, if you want to play co-op, Revelations 2 and 6 are your good starting points. But that's it. That's, my thoughts on what I recommend in many, offhand conversation. I recommend? I want to say 1. The remake for 1 is probably... Or 0. Or 0. I hear 0 is easier. Because it's a lot harder to get access to, say, Code Veronica or 2 or 3, the OG ones, if you guys don't have a PS3 or old systems. There's no... I mean, Code Veronica is playable on PS4 via the PS2 emulation, but outside of that, the most accessible one is actually Resident Evil 1 Remake. And that one actually has a mechanic where you can get zombies off of you if you have an item on you. I don't think other Resident Evil games have that. I could be mistaken. I've only played the original ones so much. But if you're gonna play like the OG ones, the classic ones, yeah, starting with 1 or 0 is a good option. I'd say definitely 1 the most because of that little buffer leeway that it lets you in case you make a mistake. And yeah, I find its save systems very generous. Also adds an easy mode. Oh yeah, yeah. Actually, you know what? 1 and 0 for sure because they actually have an easy mode. So yeah, for sure, those would be the ones I'd recommend the most. Plus, they look absolutely amazing. So they aged like fine wine. So it'd be Resident Evil 0 remastered or Resident Evil 1 remake remastered. That's so stupid to say.